The world once ran on ice, not the clinking cubes of modern freezers, but blocks cut by hand, drawn from frozen lakes under a pale winter sun. Before electricity, before refrigeration, the cold itself was a resource harvested like wheat or timber, stored through the seasons and shipped across oceans. Imagine, if you will, standing on the frozen surface of a lake in Massachusetts or Maine. Sometime in the mid-1800s, the air is still. The ice beneath your boots is thick, blue-gray and solid, a mirror of the quiet sky above.
Around you.
Men move in slow, methodical rhythm. Horses drag saws across the frozen plain, iron teeth biting in straight, deliberate lines. The sound is steady, almost musical, scraping, cracking, and the distant creak of wooden sledges. Tonight, we'll drift through that frozen world. We'll walk alongside the men who carved the winter itself into commerce. We'll follow the rise of the ice trade, a business so improbable that it turned lakes into gold. We'll uncover the forgotten ruins where ice was stored. We'll contrast the cold endurance of the ice cutters with the warmth they delivered to cities far away. So settle in, let your breathing slow, like the world under snow. The story begins with the rhythm of work, measured, quiet, and glinting in the pale light of winter. Morning begins before the sun rises. The men arrive bundled in layers of wool and canvas, their breath turning instantly to vapor. The horses stamp the snow, restless and steaming. The air smells faintly of pine from the sledges and the wood smoke drifting from the cook tent on shore. Each man knows his place. There are the markers, walking with poles to measure the ice. The sawyers, who drive their blades into the frozen sheet, and the haulers, who guide the great blocks to the ramps that lead up from the lake's edge. The ice itself is about a foot thick, clean and glassy, cut into neat squares that shimmer faintly as they slide free of the water. It's cold work, a cold that seeps through gloves and boots, finding its way into joints and breath. But there's a strange peace to it too. The day passes in repetition. Saw, lift, slide, stack. The sound carries far, a mix of scraping steel, the thud of wooden levers, and the occasional shout that echoes off the frozen shore. Sometimes, if you pause and listen, the lake itself speaks, long, deep cracks that roll like thunder beneath the surface. The men hardly notice. It's part of the rhythm, part of the life of the ice. By noon, the light brightens and the work speeds up. Blocks are floated through narrow channels, guided by long poles, toward the loading ramps. From there, men stack the ice into wagons lined with straw. The horses pull them toward the great wooden ice houses that stand near the shore, their walls thick and draftless, waiting to be filled. The inside of an ice house feels like another world, cool, dim, and smelling of damp wood and straw. Men move quickly, placing each block carefully, packing sawdust between them. They'll stay frozen there until the summer comes, when ships will carry them far to the south, to New York, Havana, or even Calcutta. For now, though, the men keep working. The sun sinks low, the wind sharpens, the sky turns a pale, wintry violet. And as the last blocks are drawn from the lake, the ice house doors close, shutting away the cold for another season. There's a satisfaction in it, quiet, heavy, and earned. The day ends as it began, breath steaming, boots creaking, the sound of metal against wood fading into the frozen stillness. The story of ice as a global trade begins with one man, Frederick Tudor, a Boston merchant who saw wealth where others saw only winter. In 1806, he began shipping blocks of frozen lake water to the Caribbean, a plan so strange that his peers laughed at it. Oh, they asked, would buy ice in the tropics? How could it survive the journey? Yet Tudor persisted, cut ice from the ponds of New England, packed it in sawdust, and loaded it aboard wooden ships. The first voyage was rough. Much of the cargo melted before it reached its destination. But Tudor learned, and so did the men who worked with him. He refined the packing methods, built larger ice houses at both ends of the journey, and perfected the art of preserving cold in transit. By mid-century, ice was no longer a curiosity. It was a commodity. Ships laden with glistening blocks left Boston Harbor for ports across the world, Havana, Rio de Janeiro, Bombay, even the far corners of Africa and Australia. Tudor became known as the Ice King and his network of ice cutters. Haulers and shippers transformed the rhythms of global trade. The industry changed daily life in ways subtle and profound. In cities, Ice allowed butchers and fishmongers to preserve their goods, kept milk from spoiling, and made chilled drinks a symbol of refinement. Hospitals used it to ease fevers. Bakers used it to keep dough from rising too quickly in the heat. For the workers back home, though, little changed. The ice still had to be cut by hand, hauled, and stacked. It was seasonal work, months of hard labor followed by long stretches of idleness. Wages were modest, but the trade brought a strange kind of pride. These men, anonymous and uncelebrated, knew they were sending comfort to faraway places. In some small way, they connected winter and summer, cold and heat, the northern lakes and the southern seas. As the 19th century progressed, the ice trade became a vast enterprise. Cities built enormous depots. Railways carried ice inland, where farmers could cool their milk and townsfolk could store food. It was, in a quiet way, a revolution, one powered not by fire or steam, but by frost and patience. And through it all, the ice cutters worked in their rhythm unchanged. Every winter, the saws returned to the lakes, and the steady song of the harvest began again. Today, most of the ice houses are gone. But if you walk through certain woods in New England, or along quiet riverbanks in Norway, or the hills of northern India, you might still find traces. Stone walls half buried in moss, wooden beams collapsed into damp earth, caverns lined with ancient sawdust, now home to roots and silence. Archaeologists who study these sites sometimes find unexpected remains: the straw used for insulation, the wooden tools used to stack the blocks, and the faint traces of saw grooves and stone floors. Each mark is a record of human ingenuity, of men finding ways to trap the cold and hold it through the seasons. In some places, the ice never melted. Deep in shaded hills or cellars, layers of frost can still be found, compressed, compacted, mixed with dust and memory. The cold preserved not just food, but fragments of time itself. Even more haunting are the ships, the ones that never reached their destinations. Wooden hulls resting on seabeds, their holds once filled with ice. Divers have found traces of these cargoes, rusted hooks, packing sawdust, and the faint outlines of the wooden compartments that once held the harvest of winter. It's a strange thought that blocks of frozen lake water once crossed the equator, survived months at sea, and melted in cups thousands of miles away. And stranger still, that some of those voyages never ended, the ice vanishing into the sea it sought to master. The mystery of the trade lies not in treasure or lost wealth, but in what it says about human persistence. How people once labored to move something invisible, the feeling of cold from one world to another. If you listen closely, standing by an old pond in winter, you might still hear it. The faint sound of saws, the rhythm of work, the ghosts of men cutting silence into perfect squares. The ice cutters worked in the open air, their hands raw, their faces windburned. Their reward was simple: a hot meal, a small wage, and the knowledge that their labor mattered somewhere beyond the horizon. In cities far away, the ice they harvested filled glass tumblers on warm evenings. It cooled the sickroom of a child with fever, clinked in the glasses of travelers and merchants, politicians and poets. Their sweat and frost became someone else's ease. There's a quiet contrast in that. The cold endurance of laborers against the warmth they preserved. The frozen lake against the bustling city. The steady patience of winter against the fleeting luxury of summer comfort. It's a reminder of how much of history rests on unseen hands. The men whose names never appeared in ledgers, whose work vanished as completely as the ice they cut. When refrigeration came, their world melted away almost overnight. The saws grew dull. The ice houses emptied. The lakes froze still, untouched. But the rhythm remains, in the sound of a refrigerator hum, in the clink of ice in a glass, in the way we still treasure the coolness of a summer drink. A faint echo of winter's harvest lives on, carried quietly through time. The ice cutters are gone now, but their world lingers in ponds that still freeze each winter. In old timbers reclaimed by the woods, in the soft creak of ice expanding under a pale sky. They remind us that even the simplest things, cold, water, labor, once held immense meaning. That warmth, comfort, and ease were once hard-won luxuries, carved from frozen lakes by patient hands. As you imagine that quiet scene, the breath of men and horses rising into the clear air, the soft scrape of saws, the glimmer of sunlight on ice. Let it slow your thoughts. The world for a moment is frozen again, still, peaceful, waiting for spring. The cold fades, but the memory of its rhythm remains calm, enduring, and eternal.